They said Lena was too emotional, that she always took things the wrong way. But no one said a word when her grandparents cried over the phone, begging for help to save her cousin's life. No one questioned why a family that barely spoke to her suddenly needed her entire college fund. They called her gift an act of love. But 2 weeks later, her cousin was posing next to a brand new convertible, passport in hand, headed to Europe. And Lena, the girl who'd worked every weekend since she was 12, was back to square one. They said she overreacted. They said she should be proud to have helped family, but no one asked how it felt to be used, then discarded like she never mattered. Lena Carter grew up walking the thin line between two worlds. Her mother, a soft-spoken white woman from an old Virginia family, passed away when Lena was just 6. Her father, Marcus, worked janitorial shifts at the local hospital, raising Lena on grit, prayer, and second-hand textbooks. On holidays, the Whitmans, her mother's parents, would invite them over, but never without glancing sideways. Lena noticed early how they called her so well-spoken, as if surprised, how they lit up when her cousin Lily visited, showering her with praise and gifts, while Lena sat politely, invisible in plain sight. She learned in silence that being family didn't always mean being wanted. Lena's childhood was stitched together by second shifts and quiet resilience. After her mother passed, it was just her and her father in a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. While other girls decorated lockers and gossiped about dances, Lena learned to boil pasta at 8 and help mop floors at the community center by 11. Her father, Marcus, never once complained. He packed lunches at dawn, folded uniforms in silence, and told her every night, "We don't have much, baby, but we have enough." And somehow, that always felt true. At school, Lena stood out. Bright, curious, always a few chapters ahead. But when the teacher praised her in front of the class, she'd catch the sideways glance of a girl who'd whisper, "charity case," under her breath. She never responded. She just worked harder. By the time she turned 14, Lena had started saving, babysitting, dog walking, picking up shifts at the local diner every Saturday. Every crumpled bill went into a jar marked Columbia, taped shut and tucked behind the cereal boxes. She didn't spend. She didn't splurge. Every dream she had came with a price tag, and she was determined to earn it herself, penny by penny, while no one was watching. The day the letter came, the world held its breath. It arrived in a plain white envelope, tucked between electric bills and supermarket flyers. There was nothing grand or golden about it, just a crisp return address in Upper Manhattan, and Lena's name typed in bold. She held it in her hands like it might vanish, afraid to break the seal. Her father looked up from the sink, a sponge dripping in his hand. "Is that it?" he asked, his voice careful, like he was afraid to hope too loud. Lena nodded. Her hands trembled as she tore the flap open. She didn't read it out loud. She just stared at the words. The edges of the page curled slightly as her grip tightened. Then, without warning, she dropped to the floor. Not from despair, but disbelief. "Dad," she whispered. "I got in." Marcus froze for a moment, then moved to kneel beside her. He pulled the letter from her hands and scanned it. "Columbia University is pleased to offer you admission." His voice cracked. "Oh, Lena." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her like he had when she was 6, and too small to understand what losing her mother meant. But this hug was different. It was pride and joy and years of silent prayers answered all at once. They sat there on the kitchen floor, laughter and tears mixing in the late afternoon light. The letter offered a partial scholarship. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Lena had saved over $38,000. It wouldn't cover 4 full years, but it was enough to get her started. Her father pulled away, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You did this," he said. Every late night, every weekend, you made this real. Lena didn't say anything at first. She was still somewhere between shock and elation. It doesn't feel real, she finally said, her voice soft. But I never stopped wanting it. Later that evening, she placed the letter in a cheap picture frame from the dollar store and set it on the kitchen table. It stayed there for weeks. Every time she passed by, she looked at it, not to remind herself of her accomplishment, but to remember the path it took to get there. Not a single step had been easy. She hadn't had legacy letters or prep schools. Just work, just faith, just grit. Outside, spring was unfolding across the city. Kids played in front yards. Sirens passed in the distance. And in one small apartment, a girl who had been overlooked and underestimated her whole life had just punched a hole through the future and made a space for herself where no one thought she belonged. The phone rang on a Thursday evening, just as Lena was preparing dinner. She'd been humming to herself, peeling sweet potatoes with a rhythm that felt hopeful. Columbia was 3 months away. She had made a spreadsheet of expenses, books, housing, meal plans. Everything felt like it was finally coming together. Then came the call. The screen flashed Grandma Joanne, a number she hadn't seen pop up in months. Lena hesitated, fingers still damp from washing produce. She wiped them on a dish towel and answered. "Hi, Grandma," she said cautiously. The voice on the other end trembled. "Lena, sweetheart, we hate to call like this, but we didn't know who else to turn to." Lena froze. It wasn't the usual detached formality. Her grandmother sounded fragile, panicked even. "It's Lily," Joanne continued, her voice cracking. "She's sick, really sick. It's her liver. They found something, a mass. The doctors say she needs surgery as soon as possible, or it could spread." Lena's heart skipped. "Wait, what? Is she in the hospital?" "She's home now, but they're trying to schedule the procedure. The problem is, insurance won't cover it. It's classified as experimental." "It's $45,000, Lena, and we don't have that kind of money." Lena felt her stomach tighten. Her grandparents weren't poor. Not rich, but certainly not struggling. They lived in a 4-bedroom house in Asheville, and always had fresh flowers in crystal vases when she visited as a child. But still, this sounded serious. "Real," Joanne continued, her voice barely above a whisper now. "I know we haven't always been close, and I know things haven't been perfect. But Lily, she's just a kid. She has her whole life ahead of her. We're so scared. We didn't know who else would understand." Lena bit her lip. "Have you tried fundraising? Insurance appeals? There are grants." "There's no time, sweetheart," Joanne interrupted gently. "They said the longer we wait, the worse it gets. We're already looking at refinancing the house, but that takes time we don't have. Your name came up because, well, we know you've always been smart with money." The implication sat heavy. Lena didn't respond right away. Her thoughts were a storm. Was this real? Was Lily really dying? Her cousin had never been unkind. If anything, Lily had always seemed blissfully unaware of the quiet coldness their grandparents held toward Lena. Joanne spoke again. "I know it's asking a lot, but if you have anything you can spare, even a part of your college savings, it could make the difference." And just like that, it landed. The unspoken suggestion. Give up your future. Help the golden child live. Lena's voice trembled. I need to think." "Of course, sweetheart," Joanne said. "We're just so desperate. If we don't find the money by next week, we don't know what will happen." They ended the call with forced politeness, but when Lena set the phone down, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She stood alone in the kitchen, as steam curled from the boiling pot on the stove. Her breath caught somewhere between suspicion and guilt. And as the sweet potatoes began to overcook, Lena stared at the wall, a single question looping in her mind. Why me? Dinner sat untouched on the table. The potatoes had gone cold, and the chicken smelled faintly of rosemary, but neither Lena nor Marcus moved to eat. They sat in silence, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space between them. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low and steady. So let me get this straight. They haven't called you in how long, and now they need 45 grand for a surgery they can't explain, with no hospital, no documents, no doctor's note. Lena didn't answer. She just stared at the edge of her plate, her fingers curled around her fork like it anchored her to the moment. I'm not saying it's a scam, Marcus added carefully. But this smells like the same guilt-tripping they've been doing for years. Same playbook, different chapter. Lena looked up, her eyes glassy. But what if it's real, Dad? What if she's actually sick and I do nothing? You owe them nothing, he said, more firmly now. Especially not the savings you've built with your own 2 hands. But Lily doesn't owe me anything either, Lena whispered. She's not the one who treated us like outsiders. She's just Lily. Marcus sighed. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. Sweetheart, I watched you work through flu seasons and snowstorms. I watched you miss birthdays and field trips to build that fund. That's not just money. That's your life, poured into a dream. Lena's lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. The weight of the moment pressed down like a fog. She thought of Lily's smile at last Christmas, of how she had complimented Lena's thrifted sweater like it was couture. She'd never been cruel, just lucky. Chosen. I'm not saying I'll give them all of it, Lena said slowly, but maybe enough to get her into the hospital. Maybe 20. I can still take out loans. Community college for 2 years, then transfer. That's not the end of the world. Marcus shook his head. You're doing what they want, Lena. You're adjusting your life to their emergency without asking for proof, without demanding honesty. Do you really believe they'd do the same for you? Lena stared at her reflection in the kitchen window, hazy, faint. I believe that if I don't help and something happens to her, I'll carry that weight forever. Marcus stood, walked around the table, and placed his hands on her shoulders. That's the kind of heart your mama had, he said gently. But hearts like that, they get used up if you're not careful. The clock ticked on. Outside, dusk had deepened into night. Inside, Lena sat motionless, her mind circling the impossible. Help and lose everything she'd built, or protect her dream and risk being the girl who didn't care enough. Neither choice felt like victory, just different shades of regret. It was a Saturday morning when the truth first began to surface. Lena had gone to the library to clear her head. She couldn't focus on anything, not her reading list, not her future dorm plans. Her thoughts always drifted back to the check. $45,000. Every cent she had saved since she was 12 was now gone. Just like that, she kept replaying the moment she handed it over, her grandmother's trembling hands, her grandfather's choked-up voice, the thank you card they sent the next day with, "You've done something truly noble," scrawled in cursive. She wanted to believe them. God, how she wanted to believe them. Then, later that evening, while scrolling through social media to distract herself, she saw it. A photo. Her cousin Lily, standing beside a brand-new pearl-white convertible, grinning ear to ear. A red bow draped over the hood like it was Christmas morning. The caption read, "Our Lily deserves the world. Congrats on your graduation. Can't wait to hear all about Paris." Lena stared at the screen, her chest tightening. Her eyes moved to the comments. people congratulating, heart emojis, champagne glasses. Then, another post. Just an hour later, Lily in an airport lounge holding a passport and a designer carry-on. Off to Europe. France, Italy, and Greece. First class all the way. Lena's breath caught. Her fingers began to tremble. She clicked out of the app and sat still for a long time. Her mind scrambled for a reasonable explanation. Maybe the surgery had already happened. Maybe they had other money saved for Lily. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. She called her grandmother. Joanne answered on the third ring, her voice overly cheerful. "Lena, sweetheart." "So nice to hear from you." Lena kept her voice even. "I saw Lily's posts. The car, the trip. Is she better now?" There was a pause, too long. "Oh," Joanne said lightly. "Yes, thank goodness. It was a false alarm. The tests were wrong. The doctors said she's perfectly healthy. A miracle, really." Lena swallowed. "So, the money?" Another pause. "We decided Lily needed something special to celebrate. She's worked so hard, and she's the first in the family to go straight to a 4-year university. These experiences shape young people, you know. They build character." Lena's voice dropped. "You told me she was dying." "Well, we were told it could be serious, and we didn't want to worry you again after everything. But look how it turned out. It all worked out for the best." Lena ended the call without another word. She sat in silence, staring at the framed Columbia acceptance letter across the room. For years, it had been her symbol of hope. Her reward. Her proof that effort mattered. Now it stared back at her like a joke she didn't understand anymore. It wasn't just the money that was gone. It was the trust. The belief that maybe, just maybe, she could belong in both halves of her family. That maybe, finally, she was seen. But she was wrong. She hadn't been seen. She had been used. The dinner invitation arrived in the form of a group text. A message from her Aunt Caroline, cheerful and oblivious, read, "Family dinner this Saturday at Grandma's. Celebrating Lily's graduation and her big adventure ahead. Everyone be there by 6, formal attire." Lena stared at the screen, her hands clenched. They were throwing a party, a celebration, for the trip they had funded with her future. She didn't tell her father right away. She kept it to herself for 2 days, the weight of it curdling in her stomach. When she finally showed him the message, Marcus read it once, then set the phone down and said flatly, "We're not going." But Lena's voice was calm. "I want to go." He looked up sharply. "Why?" "I need to see them," she said. "I need to see how far they'll go to pretend nothing happened." Marcus studied her face. It wasn't anger that he saw. It was something colder, resolved, hardened. Saturday came fast. They arrived on time. The Whitman home was glowing with string lights and laughter. Dozens of guests milled about with glasses of wine, admiring framed photos of Lily's childhood lined along the hallway. Lily in ballet, Lily at the beach, Lily holding a certificate with Grandma and Grandpa beaming at her sides. Not a single photo of Lena. When they entered the dining room, the conversations paused only briefly, then resumed in a polite hush. Lily stood in the center of the room, dressed in a cream cocktail dress that sparkled under the chandelier. She smiled when she saw Lena and waved, seemingly unaware of the tension slicing through the air. Joanne stepped forward, arms open. "Lena, you came. That's so lovely, dear." Lena offered a nod, nothing more. Dinner was extravagant. Lobster risotto, lemon roasted chicken, hand-rolled pasta. As the guests passed dishes and raised glasses, Mr. Whitman clinked his fork against his wine glass and stood. "We just want to say how proud we are of our Lily." he began, his voice thick with pride. "She's accomplished so much, and we wanted to give her a proper send-off. First-class flights, 3 weeks through Europe, Paris, Rome, Athens. Nothing but the best for our girl." Lena's fork stopped mid-air. There was a ripple of applause. Someone turned to her. "And what about you, Lena? Where are you off to?" Before she could answer, her grandmother chimed in, smiling sweetly. "Lena's taking a more practical path. Community college, I believe. Nothing wrong with that." The words landed like a slap. Lena set her fork down gently, dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin, and stood. The chatter quieted. She looked around the table, at the faces she had once tried to impress, to belong to. "I was accepted to Columbia," she said evenly. "I had the savings to go, until I gave it away." Silence. "You told me Lily was dying, that she needed surgery, that it was life or death. But now I see she needed... what? A convertible? A European vacation? Someone dropped a spoon. Lena turned to Lily, who looked stunned. "Did you know where the money came from?" "No," Lily said quietly, shaking her head. Grandpa cleared his throat, face flushed. "We did what we thought was best for the family." "No," Lena replied. "You did what was best for Lily, and you lied to me to do it." She turned to the room. "To the rest of you, just know, when they talk about generosity, they don't mean sacrifice. They mean theft, dressed up in pearls and good manners." Then she left. No tears, no yelling, only the sound of her heels against marble and the click of a door closing behind her. And for the first time in her life, the silence that followed didn't feel like exclusion. It felt like clarity. The next morning, Lena sat across from her father, the silence between them heavier than usual. "I want to talk to a lawyer," she said quietly. Marcus nodded. "I know someone." By midweek, they were in a modest office with Grace Walton, a composed woman with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. Lena told her everything, the phone call, the check. The truth she'd uncovered. She didn't cry. She laid it out like a case file, clean and controlled. Grace listened without interruption, then said, "This is fraud. They lied to obtain money. That's actionable." Lena hesitated. "Their family. I'm not trying to destroy anyone." "Seeking accountability isn't destruction," Grace replied. "It's self-respect." Lena spent the next few days gathering evidence, texts, voicemails, bank records, screenshots of Lily's posts. At night, she helped kids write scholarship essays at the youth center. During the day, she built her case. When the demand letter was ready, Grace slid it across the table. 10 days, full repayment plus interest, or we go to court. Lena picked up the pen and signed. It wasn't revenge. It was reclaiming her name, her future. And for the first time in weeks, when she walked out onto the street, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt like the beginning of something honest. The response came on the 9th day. A thin envelope arrived at Grace's office, delivered by courier. No check, just a typed letter from the Whitman's attorney. "Our clients deny any wrongdoing. The funds were gifted voluntarily and without condition. However, to avoid further family discord, they are willing to offer a partial repayment of $15,000, payable over 5 years, on the condition that Lena signs a non-disclosure agreement and waives all further claims." Lena read the letter in silence. When she looked up, her voice was flat. "They stole 45 grand and are offering me monthly payments. Like I'm some charity case?" Grace nodded. "Standard intimidation. They're testing if you'll settle to avoid conflict." Lena didn't flinch. We moved forward. That afternoon, the lawsuit was filed. Within 24 hours, the calls started. First from her grandmother, pleading, Then from her aunt, accusing. Even Lily texted, unsure who to believe. But Lena didn't respond. Not until the 10th day, when a cashier's check for the full amount arrived. $46,200 with interest. No apology. Just a note. Paid to preserve family peace. Not an admission of guilt. Lena stared at it for a moment. It wasn't remorse, but it was closure. Lena stood beneath the stone archway of Columbia's main gate, her suitcase in one hand, a folded map of campus in the other. Around her, freshmen buzzed with nervous energy, parents hugging goodbye, roommates exchanging awkward introductions. But Lena didn't feel lost in the crowd. She felt anchored. Her phone buzzed. A message from her father. Proud of you, always. Call me tonight. She smiled, then glanced up at the towering brick buildings that had once felt like a distant dream. Now, they were hers. Inside her dorm, the walls were bare, the bed still untouched. She placed one item first, a framed copy of her acceptance letter. The original had been stained with tears and time. This one was clean, crisp, a fresh start. Later that night, she sat alone on the quad bench, the city lights flickering in the distance. She wasn't angry anymore, not numb either. Just clear. She whispered to no one in particular. They took my money, but they couldn't take me. And that was the real win. Because family isn't who claims you. It's who shows up when everything's on fire and hands you water instead of gasoline. And Lena, she'd learned to carry her own.